so a clinician scientist. He received his MD from Warsaw Medical School in 1991, and 3 years later he obtained his PhD from the Faculty of Health Sciences in Copenhagen and became a specialist in dermatology in 2001. So that means that certified in Denmark. Then he was appointed a full clinical professor in the University of Copenhagen in 2015 at the university, and in 2015 he came to Canada and became a professor in the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Dr. Gniadecki has served as president of the Danish Dermatological Society, treasurer of the Canadian Dermatology Foundation, and he was a board member in the European Society of Dermatological Research and International Society of Cutaneous Lymphomas. You have heard Dr. Gniadecki speak yesterday, and I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Gniadecki to give this lecture.
Well, thank you so much for the most kind invitation. And do the same for Dr. White did. I will take the mask off and stay a bit away from the microphone. So at least you can see my face, remember me next time you see me. So, you know, listening to Dr. White's lecture, I thought how lucky I am that I'm a clinician scientist and not just a scientist. You know, I would probably mentally go down on this type of career. I think it's extremely hard because you're competition with the entire world all the time. You don't do that as a clinician scientist, you can always switch, you know. You have your day job, which is seeing patients. It gives you money, it gives you a nice cushion you can always fall on. And then if you like to, you can do your science on a higher level. So I will tell you maybe how to think about it and how to incorporate it into your career. But before we do that, how many of you are med students or early stage residents? 1, 2, so the rest are what, basic science? Basic science? Oh my goodness, this will be irrelevant to you, what I'm saying. Or maybe you go to med school, you know? Yeah, some will go to med school, yeah. You know, how the science is incorporated into the medical career is different from country to country. I would say Canada is still kind of a low level. People do a lot of research in the med school. Most do research to qualify for residency. So it's totally opportunistic way of approaching research. Few will do because they really feel the calling, and I think it's very important, you know, to find this in you to really like to do research, because if you don't like to, your career will not be a happy career. Okay, if you don't really feel, if something doesn't tell you, yeah, this is something nice to do. And I don't know, when I started, I didn't really know what to do, but I was kind of fascinated by the concept of a lab. You know, it was like a church, like a mystery, and this was what attracted me, really. You know, I didn't even know what it means to be a researcher, but I wanted to be a part of this church. You know, it was a kind of a religious experience, being in the basement of immunology lab of Warsaw Medical School. Yeah, this was an experience. Okay. So this calling is very important. If you don't have it, try to be good physicians. Don't even try to be scientists. But if you like it, try to incorporate this in your career. And then again, there are some countries like Denmark, when I worked for almost all my professional life, when doing research is a part of your education. And actually, University of Copenhagen believes that you can educate people by letting them doing research. So all our residents had PhDs, basically. PhD was a part of your normal education for most of the doctors going to a specialty. So you will finish the med school, you will have 3 or 4 years doing PhD with a shorter program, and then you will apply for residency. It's very different here, because just after med school, you go to residency, and then what? You don't have really time for PhD unless you have done it before. So a very different system, which blocks a lot of career possibilities for you as big-time researchers. But there are other ways to do research. Okay, what are the benefits? I think we have heard some of the benefits from Dr. White. You are enlarging your network enormously. Okay? As a physician, you have no network. You know doctors around in your province, around your city. If you are a researcher, you're suddenly a member of this, international group, even if a younger one, and you are talking to smart people, this increases your cognitive bubble, like, by the factor of, I don't know, 1,000. This for me was like probably the most important thing doing research. Suddenly I could go and meet people who are that much smarter than I am, get the ideas. It is much better than sitting in Montreal, whatever city you're coming from, with three of your fellow dermatologists and doctors talking about the same all the time. Like how to run the clinic, what is the billing codes for cyst excision, Suddenly you're on a different level. So this for me is kind of a phenomenal thing. Second thing I will say is that being a clinician researcher is a very rare species in Canada. If you do that, your job opportunities are great. Remember, many jobs are not even advertised, and if they're advertised, they already know who is getting the job. So how they find people? Through the network. So they know Dr. Litvinov. Dr. Litvinov could go and work anywhere tomorrow, because he's kind of well known. He has the network of you can't, okay? Because you are just a clinician, one of many. So doing research makes you unique, okay? Third thing, it's kind of derivative of those two. It gives you this anti-fragility. So what is anti-fragility? Whatever happens to you will be fine, okay? So if the billing codes for disease A goes down and you can't make your money, you can always increase your research component, and increase this. If research doesn't go well, you can do more clinics, This is what I do all the time. My research goes like up and down. I have good years and horrible years. I have no ideas, and I have great ideas. So you can, kind of go from one field to another in a smooth way and have a great professional life. Okay? And then finally, that we rarely talk about, or maybe I'll show you the slide. Can we have the slides, please? Yeah. Doing research is not boring. Doing clinical work all the time is boring. Specialist dermatology is boring. So it's fun for the first 5 years, okay? It's fun for the first 10 years. But you guys, you are thinking about covering 35 to 40 years of professional life. Doing what? Seeing psoriasis, eczema, and warts? This is this. This is like living in one of those houses. Doing research is living here, no 2 days will be identical to you, so it's much more fun. And I think really boredom is something we rarely talk about. I think this is the source of the physician burnout. 30% of dermatologists will burn out in the professional career. Why? Because they sit in the same office at the same desk day after day after day, and they don't even want to take a break because every time they have holidays, they can't bill. So it's a loss of money. So you are kind of putting yourself under arrest, Doing research gives you much wider opportunities. So, all right. How much time do you have? Now, instead of talking about my life, which is probably not very representative, but very boring to you, I will tell you what are the ways you can incorporate the research, okay? You can be big scientist, doing big science. This is what the White is doing. You are a part of an institution. You have a formalized academic career from lecturer to assistant, associate professor, full professor in the end. You're getting tenured. We have heard about the challenges. This is the way of doing big science. You are running a lab, you're having people, and so on and so on. There's another way. It's doing small science. Okay, so what is, and I think we should think more about that. So what is small science? Okay, so this is the big science. This is quite new, doing big science. It's big groups, collaborations, grants, machines, core facilities, big publications. But you can be the small scientist, which is not really small, it's old-fashioned. Is this genius sitting somewhere getting the great idea, okay? So scientist as a thinker, and I think being a doctor, you can think about yourself as somewhere on this scale. You don't necessarily need to have academic career if you don't like politics in academia, okay? You may not like it, or they may not like you. You know, it's very political to be a professor and getting a tenure. It's not really up to you, it's up to the committee, okay? But you can still be kind of more like this lonely genius, looking at your patient, getting ideas, okay? So here, it's like an extreme, okay? So research is driven by the career. We heard this, you need to get to the next step. You need to get the tenure. If you don't get the tenure, you're done, you know? You have to find something else to do. Here, you're independent. So whatever interests you will drive you, okay? Independent, institutionalized, okay? Big research is small progress, small bricks added to the building of science. This one, huge leaps, okay? This is more like a hobby. You have your day job, being a doctor. This is your day job here, doing research. Okay? So a few examples, you know, from the history, who was the big and who was the small. So if you think of all, you know, researchers we admired from the past, Newton, Galileo, Feynman, they were all small, did small science. They all thought before they did the experiment, okay? You can say, okay, Newton was a professor in Oxford. Yeah, but he was not hired actually to do research. No, he devised differential calculus when he was actually in his house, hiding from Black Death, you know, epidemic. He stopped in Oxford, went to his house, and sitting then alone, you know, devised the calculus that we still teach in universities. And then he became the director of the London Mint. So his idea was how you protect money from counterfeit, you know, and how do you know how much money you print. So this was his day job, but his hobby was the theory of gravity that we know him for. Okay. Big scientists are those institutional scientists, Fauci, Collins, who was running the Human Genome Project. They couldn't do that sitting home alone, okay? And there is nothing bad or good about any of those, okay? It's depending on you. You can become either, depending on what kind of person you are, okay? Yeah. Problem with big science is unsustainable. The cost is exponentially increasing. At some point, we have heard how difficult it is actually to get tenure and become, you know, employed at the university as a pure scientist. There's simply no money, and the money is running off. As a small scientist, you are independent. Okay, you are not depending on anybody giving you money because you have your own. You earn your own money. Okay. Do I have like a few more minutes, or I'm done? Because I would like to show you one example. Okay. Tilda, I'm not showing an example of myself. First of all, I'm not a great scientist, and second, you know, I think it's much more interesting to look at the scientist that you probably don't know. Who heard about Niels Finsen? Of course you did. Of course you did, you know. So Niels Finsen is the only Nobel Prize that was given to a dermatologist ever. Okay. And if you live in Denmark, his name is everywhere. He's like a national hero. You have Finsen Institute, so I work in Finsen Institute. You have Finsen Foundation, okay? So it's interesting to hear to know his story of life because it can give you an idea how to become a great physician, great scientist, you know, by insight. So he came to Denmark from Faroe Islands. Faroe Islands, small islands over Scotland. It's a territory of Denmark. So people there speak Danish. They speak Faroese, but they speak Danish. So he came to Copenhagen for the med school, okay, in 1890. And he got the Nobel Prize for inventing the idea you can treat skin diseases with sunlight. So he's the father of photobiology. So every time you give UVB treatment to your patients, Niels Finsen had the idea how to do that. Okay, and he observed the beneficial effect of sunlight on himself. So he had Niemann-Pick disease, which at this time was incurable. I think it still is. Okay, and this is what he wrote in his diary. Okay, and I will read it for you because it's very interesting. So maybe I can read from here. So the disease was responsible for my starting investigations on light. And why did it happen? So he suffered from anemia and tiredness, and he was thinking, why is this happening? And then he observed he lived in a dark house facing the north. Okay, so he thought, could it help to get more sunlight? So he went and got some sunlight, and he felt so much better. And then I think, as dermatologists always say, hide from sunlight, hide from sunlight. Sunlight has also some beneficial effect, okay? And then as an enthusiastic medical man, I was of course interested how the sunlight worked on him, and then he thought what is known from physiology, and he got to the conclusion that he was right and all the physiology books are wrong. So I have highlighted two things here. One thing is, as an enthusiastic medical man, so he had this inner flame, he wanted to do science. He used himself as a model, Sometimes we use patients, but, thinking about himself is also idea. Second thing is, I drew the conclusion that I was right and the science was wrong. Unfortunately, you need to have a bit of arrogance to be a good scientist. You will go nowhere just accepting whatever is the book, because this is how great ideas come. You observe something and say, everybody is probably wrong, but I feel I am right. I'm going to continue on this subject, okay? And the rest is history, really, So in 1895, he observed also other patients. So he observed the patient with lupus vulgaris, which is tuberculosis of the skin, got better when they were outside, and people who were inside were worse. So he tried in the hospital to treat people with skin tuberculosis, putting them out to the sun, okay? A couple of years later, 4 years later, he convinced the mayor of Copenhagen to build him the institute and treat the patients. And he got money, I will show you. The institute is still there. You can see the building, how it looked like. So he said, okay, instead of sunlight, I will use carbon arc. I will treat the patients with tuberculosis. And then a couple of years later, Nobel Prize. And then he died as 44. So this is not the point. The point is his path from little science, observation, insight, to becoming a big scientist with the institute, And this is the path that you can consider when you are doing your own. Okay, so don't always rely on becoming a professor as your primary thing. If you don't like the career in the academia, try to think of yourself as this independent genius researcher. Make observation of patients. Try to think what's going on. SkIN tells us so much. If you are a sharp observer, you will be able also to contribute in any way you want, what fits into your own personality. Thank you.